through bold conversations. I'm Kim Howard with Gallagher. I'm so honored to be here with Tyrone Studemeyer. We are so excited to dive in, no pun intended, to this presentation, but just need to kick off with a few housekeeping things. First and foremost, we are all here to increase awareness of diversity and inclusion topics to progress the industry towards an inclusive and high-performing culture. We want to attract new talent to our industry to meet social mobility and diversity ambitions to improve representation, and we want to enable you to take part in our year-round action to increase impact and personal contribution to culture. This could not get here without all of these sponsors, as well as our committee members and everyone involved. So I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the folks on this screen, as well as all involved to bring this to life. One more piece of housekeeping before we dive in to introduce Tyrone. This is what we utilize for our question and answer period. So what you see on the screen is a QR code. Please take a picture of it and you will be driven to the Slido website where you can insert your question and answers, and we'll monitor those throughout the presentation and they'll be answered at the end of the presentation. So we will also share this at the end, but I'll leave a few seconds here for you to take a snapshot of this QR code. And without further ado, we have here joining us who's today's lead presenter, Tyrone Studemeyer. He is the SVP of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Hyatt Hotels Corporation. He has a long laundry list of accomplishments, and we are so honored to have him here and his perspective to dive into today's presentation. Tyrone, I will hand it over to you.
Depending on where in the world you're actually streaming in on this call, we are glad to have you be a part of this dialogue and conversation. As Tim mentioned, we'll give some time for to answer some questions and have some dialogue from you that are streaming in today. I am honored to participate and share what I've been able to learn and gain over the last 30 years in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I begin my presentation by asking one simple question. In the world today, diversity is at its all-time high, and many don't really understand what it is. I ask the question, what is diversity? Some will say it's a mix of difference. Some will say it's bad. Some will say it's good. In the Americas today, when we look at our government and we see the best or the worst diversity study being aired out right in front of our very eyes, whether it's gender, it's race, it's all those ethnics, all those different things are playing out. I believe that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and equity is dancing to my own music. And if we have equity, inclusion, and diversity, we all belong to something or someone. I think it's important that we understand the evolution of diversity, particularly here in the United States. The evolution begins in 1964, the height of civil rights, in 1988. It was being compliant with the law. Many corporations, especially those who were funded by the government or doing business with government, began to do what I call the bean counting. Give me two Asians, two Latinos, 3 African Americans, 6 women, and a few good white men, and we'll be okay. What that created was polarization in the workforce, them against us, one up and one down. And so in the 1989 to 1995, it really was, how do we work along our differences? How do we respect, honor them? But everyone went through this tolerance and sensitivity training. We need to be more sensitive to other cultures, more aware of those other cultures. So white men walked out of that training with white guilt. Women and people of color walked out, I'll never break the glass ceiling, the bamboo ceiling, with another sign of polarization. Humor me, if you're in the room with someone, or just say it out loud, I tolerate you. That's what the training people walked away with. I tolerate that you're Black. I tolerate that you're white. I tolerate that you're young, old, fat, skinny, whatever it may be. But that created a negative environment. Tolerance is not one of those inclusive words. And then in 1996 to 2019, it was about show me the money, the business case, with all the research that many of the companies who are part of our sponsors, they have done around the more diverse the teams are, the more profitable, the more accessible you'll be to consumers from around the world. But people wanted to know, if you tell me that money is going to help me, if diversity is going to help me drive my business case to make money with my consumers, I'm all in. And some companies actually embraced it, particularly your product to consumers, began to listen to their consumers and began to adjust and to add or take away different things in the product and services that they provided to a more diverse consumer. But today, it is all about equality versus equity. And we look at that with the height of Black Lives Matters, the Me Too movement, Asian hate, the disrespect of the trans community, all those things during the moment of COVID collided together. And it was a big issue in that. And people, when you say, I see the equality, equity, and we've done well with equity, but the equality, but we struggle with equity, meeting people where they are. Three main components to any diversity strategy. It's very simple in my mind, is the workforce. Then it's the workplace, then the marketplace. In the workforce, where is the talent coming from? How are you recruiting? How are you retaining, developing your high potential talent within your organization? Many companies will fail because they won't be able to find talent in order to do their jobs. For example, by 2025, the baby boomers will be transitioning out of the workforce. There's 80 million baby boomers. The next generation of workers are 40 million. There's a shortfall of 40 million qualified workers. Coupled with natural attrition and retirement creates opportunities. Where will we be getting talent from? We have to make sure that we're looking at the workforce from a data analytics perspective to predict the jobs available and where we're going to go get those jobs. And then we look at the workplace. This is where the inclusion piece comes in, is how do we educate a more diverse workforce? How do we engage that workforce? I said that I've got a message here. We only seen my camera. Make sure we're sharing the screen. Share. My apologies. My apologies. We weren't seeing the slide. My apologies. When I talk about the key drivers are your people, and it's three categories: your workforce, your workplace, and your marketplace, where you actually attract and retain talent, how you develop that talent, your high potentials. In some cases, people don't know they're high potentials until they figure out, I'm going to go someplace else, there's 20% increase in my compensation, therefore I'm leaving. And when they share with the employer, we were just about to promote you, we were just about to move you into a new position, but it's a little late and a little dollar short. But then you talk about the workplace, and then we look at the education, how we're advocating, how we're communicating, how we're fostering inclusion and creating an environment where everybody can feel like they're able to contribute. I'm not a big fan when people say he or she is not a fit. It's not about fit, it's a cultural add. It's how do we add value to our culture? And let me be very clear. Culture will eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can have the best strategy, but if you don't understand the culture and how the culture will lead the business, many companies will fail. And then the marketplace. How do we show up from a brand perspective? Who do we partner with from a supplier perspective to provide suppliers or goods to our business? How do we actually connect in with organizations to provide our corporate social responsibility? What do you do from sustainability? All those things that happen in the marketplace, it's really critical to your overall success. Three major takeaways: workforce, workplace, marketplace. I'm a data analyst. I love research and data. And so we look at data to really talk about the impact on diverse teams. So when you talk about low performing teams, average performing teams, and high performing teams, no one wants to be average. But the difference between high and low, the leader that chooses to suppress or ignore the diversity of his or her team will get bad results. The leader who acknowledges, who supports, who celebrates those differences and look for ways to not manage those differences, but leverage those differences for a better outcome for us all. Let me drive this home, just another example here. Illustration I use between equality versus equity. Many of us have done well with being equitable from an equality perspective and giving everybody the same thing. As you see in this illustration, we have a family of four out for a bike ride. The son, who can't touch the pedals or get on the seat. His mother's riding comfortably, but she's concerned about her child's safety. And she looks back at her husband, who didn't want to go on the bike ride in the first place, is bent over. The bike is too small. His knees are hitting the handlebars. He's very uncomfortable. And my God, her daughter's in a wheelchair. She can't even get on the bike. That's equality. But we gave them all the same thing. We posted the jobs. We gave everybody an engagement survey. We provided everybody the same tools. But we've shifted to a point in time in society, in the workforce, we've got to focus on equity and meeting people where they are, give them the tools to be successful. As you see in the illustration, everybody has the bike to fit their needs to be successful. Language may be a barrier. English may be a barrier. not feeling like those with disabilities. Those are the fastest growing demographic today in the workforce is people with disabilities. The older we get, we have different things that we can't do. And many people are not really acknowledging in the workplace that they have a disability out of fear of some type of discrimination. So we need to make sure that we're listening to understand and not listening to respond the needs of our customers, our guests, our consumers, and certainly our talent. Let's move on. What's going to challenge the workforce more than anything else, I believe, is that we now, for the first time in American history since May of this year, we have 6 generations in the workforce. You have traditionalists who are sitting on corporate boards. You have baby boomers who are about to transition out. Generation X is somewhat in the sandwich generation, caring for their aging parents and their children that are going to school with different mindsets, with different needs. So we have to make sure that those needs are being met, that we're listening to understand, that we're making sure that those people feel like they belong, regardless of what generation they fall in, regardless of race, gender, orientation. All those things are really coming together and colliding. So what do we do with this, Tyrone? I believe that we need to build a cross-cultural competence. And cross-cultural competence is one of the top 10 competencies required to do business in the global economy. We define cross-cultural competence as the ability to discern and take into account one's own and other worldviews with care and with empathy, to be able to seize opportunities and make decisions and resolve conflicts in ways that optimize our cultural differences for better and long-lasting and more creative solutions to outperform the competition. We're shifting the mindset from tolerance to sensitivity, which I talked about tolerance being somewhat of a negative diversity word, an exclusionary word, which is an attitude, to cross-cultural competence, which is a behavior. And the only way that you're going to drive behavioral change in a corporation is through cross-cultural competence. So attitudes to behaviors, behaviors will help us sustain the growth that we've made. Well, Tyrone, how do you measure that? We measure that with an instrument called the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI model by Mitch Hammer. The work is phenomenal. I've been certified to do this work for almost 30 years, and it's amazing how the results come out. It's shifting from a monocultural mindset to intercultural global mindset, from denial to adaptation. Allow me to walk you through the orientations. It begins with denial. And denial is an orientation that people will say, I don't see the difference. I understand ethnic food. I understand ethnic garb. I don't really know that it's a place for me to dive into or be a part of. An example would be Uncle Bob goes from the rural community. He travels through the suburbs into the city. He gets carjacked. He comes back and he shares that experience with his community. And then the doubt, the fear, and sometimes hate settles in, coupled with what they may see on the news, what they may see in social media, that will drive them to say, I'll never go to the city, denying that those differences are important or valuable or for me to enhance or to be a part of. Then there's polarization. Polarization is orientation of judgment, them versus us. It takes on 2 different forms. The first form, I am defensive because my culture is better than yours. I am the dominant culture. And then the reversal side, reverting from my primary culture for the sake of others. We see this in the United States federal government, the Democrats versus Republicans. They say they want the same thing, but they go at it very differently, and it becomes polarizing. And we as voting citizens figure out, what do we do? How do we figure this out? Can't we all just get along? Then there's minimization. Minimization is orientation. We're all the same. I don't see color. My best friend is black. My God, I love women. I love women. I married one. My best friend is trans, and I'm a strong advocate for the queer community. But what they're doing is actually minimizing the other for the sake of trying to celebrate and don't recognize it. Now, I'm not saying this makes us good or bad people. I believe that we're more good than we are bad, but we have to honor those differences without minimizing the value of those differences. When people don't speak English as their first language, we have a tendency to yell at them. It's not that they can't hear, they're trying to interpret the words from one language to the other. And we make judgments and assessments of those with languages, English not their first language. We make judgments and we say they're slow, they're not bright, they're not educated. Right? But all due respect, if anyone can speak more than one language, it's far more educated than I will ever be. I digress. Let's move on. Then there's acceptance. I accept, I leverage, and I value the greater good of all people. Then adaptation. I routinely shift my behaviors to adapt to the cultures at hand. I may learn the language. I may wear the garb, and it's not Halloween. I understand what the reason for why we're wearing what we're wearing. And I'm a bridge for others to come across by sharing my experience with others, by listening with others and understanding where they may be stuck or where there may be a barrier. I will help them through my own personal journey to help them to better understand. We move on from that, and I want to share some results of a team. You can look at this individually, but at a team. But this is a team of 80 individuals, 80 leaders in this particular organization. And 60% of the leadership team sat in minimization. 18.8% sat in polarization, them against us. 13.8 sat in acceptance, and 1.3 in adaptation. So how to shift the culture, the mindset of individuals were around minimizing that there was even a problem, that it was even important. And then the few, the denial was like, I don't care. I'm coming to work, do my job, go home. I don't think it's important. I don't need to be involved. But the upside to the survey for this particular group, they perceive themselves in acceptance, but the developmental was in minimization. Now we can help. Now we can put things in place to train, to develop, to share those differences to close the gap. So they have a 24.5% gap between how they perceive themselves, how they're really showing up. And most of the times you have conversations with leaders and give them their feedback individually. They talk about it collectively. What we find out is people will say, well, I'm not a racist. It's not about race. It's about culture. And we then say to the, sometimes with the heterosexual white men, we'll say, go home and talk to your spouse and ask your spouse, ask your children. And 9 times out of 10 they come back, yes, my wife said I was minimizing and she gave me examples. Yes, my children told me that I'm in denial. So again, sometimes we don't see the things that we want to see. Let me play a video in this next slide to really drive the home, this issue home around culture, around testing products. This is really around AI. Let me be clear, this is not to disface any hotel company or restaurant. This is an example that's out on YouTube, but really drives it home. It just happens to be in Marriott. Marriott is a part of our industry. We love Marriott, support Marriott, but this could have happened in Hyatt, could have happened in Hilton, it could have happened in any organization. For example, that many times when you go into the bathroom, you will see some examples here. So gentlemen, let's play the next video.
Futurism. Entering the future.
Video, please.
Okay, Noel, we try now. Come to your hand. Two black.
Two black.
Yeah.
What I'll
Come
do?
again. Come again, Sashi.
No.
You two back over way.
What I have to do to get
what you have to do?
This is how racialist thing is.
Yeah.
I have to use that piece of white. Let's say a napkin and show again.
Again. Put your napkin again.
Napkin again.
Right. Put your hand.
What's it called on my hand?
Man, the black man getting fight down all over, boy. All over.
That was, again, as I said earlier, was a video that was done. A black man and a white man goes in to wash their hands. Because of the pigmentation of the black man, he couldn't get soap. The soap dispenser did not control for color. So we don't understand, if we don't have people that we're testing in communities, we leave someone out. This is really, AI is moving rapidly. There's some wonderful things will come out of AI, but there are also some certain things, the impact that this may have on any other society. So we have to look out for those different things when we talk about technology, we talk about AI and how those things actually show up. Now, I want to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about what we've done at Hyatt. Hyatt is a hotel company with more than 200,000 employees across more than 70 countries, with more than 30 brands under the master brand. And as everyone, a major company who responded to the death and murder of George Floyd, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matters, etc., had to do something to show that they were providing a safe and healthy environment, a psychological place for their employees to come to work and be their full authentic self. And many wrote checks. I think it was $2 to more than $1 trillion from corporations given towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. The diversity role actually was more than 4,400 jobs available during that time frame. But many had backed off. Hyatt believed that we said the change starts here, it starts with us. right? We had to look inward because during that time frame, no one was staying in hotels. We didn't have money to write out to checks to Urban League or to United Negro College Fund or to other organizations. We didn't have those type of commitments. So we looked inward and we actually started Change Starts Here with three goals: who we employ, develop, and advance, who we support, and who we buy from and partner with. We looked at representation and said that we looked at each different groups within the United States. We looked at women and people of color, and we decided that we would double the representation in each prospective people of color groups, but look at women globally to be able to look at increasing representation. And then increasing representation was the second goal under the first goal here, that increased representation of women outside of the United States at VP plus. We can hire individuals at entry level to mid-manager and to director, but we saw lack of representation above director into VP plus and in some of our general manager roles. And then the last, increasing representation of prospective people of color groups and general managers within the United States. So each region, and we have 4 regions, had to establish these goals collectively. Then we move on to who we support. We have a wonderful program that we're all very excited about. It's what we call Rise High. It's led by our colleague Jessica Schultz globally, and we look at the youth between the ages of 16 and 24 that perhaps didn't graduate high school, or perhaps did not have and is not employed and did not go on to college. We feel with having the right attitude, we can help train and develop them to move through the organization, and without a diploma, we feel we can do that. We have a goal that 45% of those hires within the United States, because of the low participation rate of Blacks, that we would increase by 45%. Then we said that we would fund some of these groups from our foundation, and our foundation was funded by many of our senior leaders, and we wanted to be able to go back and fund some of these organizations to help us to attract and retain, and this is a global goal. And then we wanted to give 1,000 pro bono hours back to the Black community in Chicago, where our corporate headquarters is, to help them to rebuild, because the impact was very strong, particularly there. Then who we buy from is we looked at the data to determine who we were buying from a women, a white male, Asian, Latinos, et cetera, and saw that we needed to put some things in place to level that playing field. So 10% of our spend went to the Black community. Allow me to share the results. Since 2020, we have added 440 women into senior level roles across the globe. This is general manager roles, VP plus roles in the organization. We now have taken a look at opportunities to open doors for the next generation of leaders, that 50% of our pipeline, 52% of our pipeline are women, and 55% of that pipeline is people of color. We now have an opportunity to develop those people, to move them into those next roles, to be able to be leaders in our organization. 38% of our Rise High hires in the United States have been African American or Black. Then we looked at our supply chain, and we looked at who we were doing business with. And since 2020, we have added more than 750 new Black vendors to our supply chain. And some of those individuals are employees that we had to lay off during COVID, that saw the need for the business and created things like back of house cleaning. Many created wines, or they created and things around breakfast sausages, and those kinds of things are now gone from colleagues to actually suppliers. Great story to tell. Outside the United States, and many of you may know that we look at race and ethnicity of the United States, but outside the United States, we only look at gender. So we wanted to lean into women. And so we created 191 mentoring partners across 18 countries to help remove the barriers or the stumbling blocks that women may have in order to move ahead within leadership. In China, particularly, some of the Chinese business leaders who own hotels would prefer a blue-eyed blonde white guy in an effort to be able to run their hotels from Europe, as opposed to someone within region. So we made sure our slate of candidates that were women were invited to be a part of that, but we led with women and got a true result out of promoting women. More than 12 women were promoted in that time frame in China, which was unheard of, particularly in that region. Don't want to leave the impression that we've made it. We still got work to do at Hyatt, but we have been working diligently. People have been committed to Change Starts Here, and these are some of the results I wanted to share with you today. If we move on, I think the key success is that we have a Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council that's led by our CEO, Mark Opamazian, and I am the co-chair. We have 8 diversity business research groups, and those 8 diversity business research groups are sponsored by our senior executives opposite of the groups, to create cross-structural competence and to show them how to advocate and be allies for others who just may be different. Our DBRGs are designed and created by the minority for the majority to have experience that otherwise they would not have. So as we celebrate culture and we dive deep, we're educating, we're looking at the differences and celebrating those differences, others will learn. Our DBRGs, regardless of which orientation or ethnic group it is or gender it is, are open to all of our colleagues. We have 2 heterosexual white men who are leading our High Black DBRG. We have 2 heterosexual white women leading our High Pride. So again, having them to advocate for others makes a world of a difference in our environment and a tremendous amount of success. Let me share some success. When we looked at our colleagues' referrals, as you see here in 2022, that our colleague referral submissions were at right under 1,000, right a little over 1,000. In 2023, based upon our DBRGs and our council, we've increased that by 1,800. We look at our people of color referral submissions for hires, we went from 484 to 829. When your colleagues feel safe, they feel a sense of belonging, they want to bring their family and their friends into the fold to be a part of that experience that they're having. It's really critical to make sure that you're listening to your colleagues, that you're understanding the needs that they have in place, you're celebrating their successes, you're moving the barriers out the way for them to be successful, regardless of their race, their gender, or their orientation, their ability or their disability. We want to make sure that that is some of the results that we've seen by enhancing those relationships. We go a step further. We looked at where we were generating revenue through our diversity business research groups with referrals. And what we saw, that we had 89 leads come out of our D&I efforts from our colleagues. Or the $6 million was in revenue. This is room revenue. We also discovered that through some listening, some of our partners and our things that we sponsored, that we were missing $6.6 million because we didn't have hotels in those destinations. If you look at the map to the right, that was quite a different places we weren't showing up. This now marries with our growth strategy to be able to show that we're growing with intent to meet the needs of our consumers who may be in different diverse environments. So when you look at diversity, it's about it's about people, it's about respect, but there's a revenue piece that's here that will drive and hit your bottom line. We've been able to drive deep. Each of our DBRGs have a discount code that they share with their groups to be able to bring that talent into the organization from a referral perspective, but also to stay at our hotels, a modest discount that they give. But we track that to really see it and listen to those individuals to make sure that we have the right products and services in our hotel to make sure we care for them to be their self. We believe that superpower is care. We believe that diversity, equity, inclusion is the manifestation of our purpose to care for people to be their best. Allow me to go to the next video, and I would like for them to play it for us, please. This is another case study out of Hilton, that these things are showing up at our front door. We have to be able to work through these issues and give our colleagues who are front end on these situations the right tool to navigate appropriately without the judgment. Can we play the video?
And welcome to KOIN 6 News at 5 o'clock. I'm Emily Burris in for Jennifer Hom.
And I'm Jeff Gianola. A black man kicked out of the DoubleTree Hotel here in Portland is now suing the hotel and its parent company, Hilton, for $10 million. I'm Jeff Gianola.
And we continue covering this case. It happened about a year ago, but it has become known as the calling his mom while black incident. Jermaine Massey made national headlines when a video he took of the situation went viral. Now his attorneys are taking legal action to uncover what they say are company policies leading to racist treatment of guests.
How am I loitering in an area that's public?
You're sitting here.
So this area is off limits after a certain time?
Only if you're a guest.
I am a guest.
A viral video turned $10 million lawsuit. Jermaine Massey, the man recording this, had just returned to the DoubleTree in downtown Portland from a concert at the Moda Center last December. He took a call from his mother in the lobby when he was approached by security.
Portland police will be here tonight.
Thank you. Call them. I'm waiting.
Okay.
Hotel management called Portland police. Eventually, Massey was escorted off the property.
It's hurtful. It's humiliating. And I don't understand why it continues to be an issue.
Jermaine Massey was calm. He was asking questions. He was a paying guest. And yet, despite all that, they labeled him a security threat and kicked him out of the hotel.
The incident made national headlines as his attorneys pushed the hotel for an explanation.
We asked 3 simple questions to Hilton. Why was he initially approached? Why was he interrogated? And why did you label him a security threat for just talking on a telephone? They never answered those questions.
Now they hope to get those answers in this new lawsuit. They say since this first made news, they've been contacted by dozens of people all over the country. They're now representing several others who say they've experienced similar instances of discrimination at Hilton properties.
Part of this litigation will be to get all of the complaints that Hilton has gotten for racial discrimination in similar circumstances, and to find out what their underlying policy is that is leading to this pattern all over the country.
Now, we reached out to DoubleTree in Portland. They have yet to comment on this new lawsuit, but in a statement today, a Hilton spokesperson said in part, quote, Hilton has zero tolerance for racism and is committed to providing a welcoming environment for all guests. Our corporate employees and Hilton-managed hotels have completed diversity training and unconscious bias training. They say that training has been accelerated at their franchise properties, including the DoubleTree in Portland. The hotel also worked with local groups like the Portland NAACP in the wake of this incident to update some of their procedures.
Stated earlier, these types of issues are showing up in social media. That same example could have happened at Hyatt, Marriott, Hilton. It could happen to any other brand. For example, McDonald's is one of the most celebrated companies in the world for diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, when the McDonald's went to India and they built their first McDonald's, it was burned down to the ground with a $100 million lawsuit. It wasn't that they sold beef, they sold fish and chicken, but they fried their French fries in alum oil. So to regain the trust with the consumer, they had to go deep into the family and the history of the family. It is very common in China for a couple to get married at McDonald's or KFC because of the fresh running water, because of the affordable food, because of the clean environment. I could have never convinced my wife in the United States to have our wedding at McDonald's or KFC. That was a part of their culture. When we look at Chevy Nova, it was a very popular car in the 70s, particularly in the United States. But when Chevy Nova went to Spain, the car fell flat. They lost millions and millions of dollars because Nova in Spanish means won't go. Who buys a car that doesn't go? So not understanding the cultural context and some of the biases that exist will afford something to hit your bottom line. Last example that I'll share with you is Goober's baby food. In the United States, it was very popular. I think more than almost a 100-year-old company, give or take 5 or 6 years. When they went to Japan and went to Africa, the consumers horrified with the packaging. The response was, we don't eat our young. Those who eat Americans chopped up their babies and put them in boxes, because in a can of corn, if can is on the outside, it's what's on the inside. If there's a picture of peas on the outside of the can, it's what's inside the can. So cultural context plays out very, very, very critical. I want to share that the work that's happening in society is showing up in social media. We've taken a look at our own biases. We've been able to look at them and determine where they're falling from a reporting perspective of the allocations. And if you see in this illustration, year over year, we have decreased by 2023, which is a carryover from George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matters movement, Asian hate, etc. We dropped down in 2024. The same thing on the cost associated, we're really down to less than $2,000. So the work can happen providing your focus on what you're doing, and the loyalty points, we're down to less 239. So again, having a focus, having the conversations, providing people with the right tools to be successful, i.e. is what we've done with living our values, empathy and inclusion. We did property training at the hotel level where we did one-on-ones. We did lead it inclusively training for our colleagues. We then did webinars to have conversations about white privilege, Black Lives Matters, the Me Too movement. We had all those different open dialogue conversations to provide a psychological place for people to be able to experience and share their experiences with others without the judgment. And then last but not least, we've now added it to our compliance training. So now our colleagues are showing up very different. They're showing up confident. They're having the right conversations without offending. Now, I'm not saying that we get it right every time. We're human. We make mistakes. I am not a big fan of canceling culture, but I do think there's cultural consequences that will occur when we're offending other cultures without, from a biased perspective. I want to end with this last video. You heard it from me. Now I want you to hear our partners and some of our colleagues that are working in diversity and inclusion from Change Starts Here. Please play the video.
So you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. I want to simplify it. Diversity has been invited to the party.
This is, okay.
Inclusion being asked to dance.
Thank you.
And equity is dancing.
This is my last slide, by the way.
Essentially every business in the wake of the killing of George Floyd said something. But the actual results and the things that you can hold us to, I don't hear a lot of that.
Change Starts Here has 3 specific commitments. The first is who we employ, develop, and advance. The second is who we support. And then the third is who we buy from and work with.
We're in a season of progress, which I think is fantastic, but I think we have an opportunity to really deepen that impact and make it something that sticks and is really more sustainable.
Rise High is a program that we have launched, filling as many of our roles as possible with opportunity youth so that we can ensure that we are on track to achieve our goal by end of 2025.
When you have people who have the interest, the passion to learn, to grow, there's no way you don't win.
Here in New Orleans, they have their hands in so many local projects and continue to grow them. We would not be in a position to offer as many scholarships as we have in our community without the support of Hyatt.
So if we're really going to change the economic gap with Blacks, it's going to be entrepreneurship, helping them with their business to grow.
A lot of our hotels have made the effort to go into their local community and find suppliers. We're paying people with under 2 weeks, 1 to 5 days if needed. In other instances, we actually gave them advance orders for a year.
We want to get there by making sure that we're changing lives of people in our communities, making sure that we're looking at the amount of vendors that we're dealing with, the stories behind what we're doing, not just the numbers.
It's a difference when a company of the magnitude of Hyatt wants to be inclusive.
A lot of times if you give people the opportunity, then they can take advantage of it and they can pass it down to the next generation.
Being a part of their Change Starts Here program that focuses on Black suppliers has been great for us. Showing other organizations that we are a part of Hyatt allowed us to say, okay, well, if Hyatt took a chance on you, so can we.
Those kinds of things were things that really showed our ability to show empathy plus action equals care.
Anything we want, I encourage you to be kind to yourself and to be kind to others. Each of us is given 24 hours a day to do what we will. When tomorrow comes, yesterday is gone. I encourage you to stop, to think, to listen, to share, to encourage others to be the best that they can while we're on this journey of diversity, equity, inclusion together. I'd like to hand it back over to Kim. Join me, please.
Thank you so much, Tyrone. I know we have virtual claps, I'm sure, around the world. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to share my screen one more time here for how we will conduct today's question and answer session. So I have seen a few questions come in, but wanted to give everyone a moment in case you joined a bit late to scan this QR code, and it will take you to our Slido Q&A. So first question I have for you, Tyrone, is you are also a published author. You wrote the book, Diversity Done Right. Tell everyone what it's about and what led you to write it.
So let me start with why I wrote the book. I've been doing diversity for quite some time, and I've been teaching and talking and sharing my experiences and experience of others. I've consulted in this space. I've led strategies for corporations. And many times people would say, where's your book? You need to write this down. I can't keep up. And I avoided it for a very, very long time. But after the death and murder of George Floyd, when companies really tried to make sure they were being more equitable and to all cultures, they wanted to increase their publications of Black, Brown, Asian, and women people. I was reached out by a publishing company. They said, you got to write a book. We're following you on social media. My family had talked about it. My colleagues had talked about it. So I gave in and I wrote the book. And I believe that, I said this earlier in my presentation, that we've gotten to be so polarizing, them against us, and we've got to, we're canceling people, people's lives are being impacted by canceling them from a cultural perspective. I just think there's a better way to do it. I don't believe that people go home at night and lay down and say, I'm going to get up and discriminate against 2 Asians, 4 Blacks, and a few good white men. I don't think that's how we wired. But I do think there's circumstances that will afford us to behave certain ways. But I think there's consequences for that behavior that we must deal with. But I do think for the most part, people just don't know what to do. People don't know how to respond, and most of the times they see negative things that happen what's on the social media. They see one side of the story, not the whole side of the story. I think the more we can come together and celebrate and honor those differences, the more creative solutions we'll have come out. When people can't be their full authentic self at work, they can't be productive. The company actually loses. They can't move ahead. So that was drove me to write the book. So I talk about, I have 8 chapters, and I give stories and examples and different models that I've shown this call today to help us really understand, who am I? It's all about me first. What it is, the power of our worldviews that shapes our beliefs and our behaviors. It's all about you, understanding from your perspective on how you view the world, Kim. And then it's all about us, how we honor and work across our differences to leverage those differences for the greater good. So the book has a series of stories and examples and my journey in diversity, being the only Black male. And oftentimes people thought I wasn't Black enough to be Black, but white enough to be white, and many thought I was from India. So I've had those issues that I had to work through. I share those in the stories with some solutions or some best practices that others can leverage for their own and their corporation's advancement in DE&I.
Lovely. I love all of that. Thank you for sharing. Next question that came in here. How do you have bold conversations about diversity struggles in a corporate environment if you are not sure about whether leadership is open to it?
So I believe that, again, going back to what people don't know, and that's why I wrote the book, is that corporations have values, right? They have a mission, they have goals. If you link diversity to the purpose of the organization, and again, organizations who have purpose, it comes alive, because our purpose is to care for people to be their best. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is the manifestation, is how it comes together. In any given day, in some of our hotels, particularly in Washington, D.C., Hyatt Regency Capitol Hill, or the Grand Hyatt, you have more than 50 different languages being spoken at one time from our colleagues, from different people around the world. So it's a business imperative for us to do that and have those conversations. And so when you have hospitals, hotels, and universities are the oldest institutions with the more diversity, and their consumers are all diverse, it's a gotta have. Right. And so it starts at the top, it's kind of top down, bottom up. The leader who understands how important people are, we say it's a number one commodity, will respect and honor those people for the greater good, will know that they'll get great results. Again, so I have the privilege, and Hyatt has the privilege. We have Mark Apamazium is one of the caringest men on the planet that I have a privilege to work with. But he really does care, but he's a strong business person, so he's connected the two. I have to sometimes slow him down. I said, no, Mark, hold on, we gotta wait. He's like, gung ho, go for it. How do we care for people? And and that care is contagious. So when you have your leaders who've embraced it, the example I gave with our diversity business resource groups, our executives are leading those groups opposite. So they've got to learn, they've got to get in. They can't just, I'm an ally because I say I'm an ally. I'm an ally because I'm in the fight with them. I'm representing and stepping into situations. We've had growth from our DBRGs. We've seen revenue come from our DBRGs, referrals coming from our DBRGs. And by the way, it gets real competitive. We rotate our leaders every 2 years is the plan, but oftentimes, I don't want to leave the women. I want to stay with the Black people. I want to stay with the Asian people. And they share and they grow together. So I think that you've got to have leadership that's got to start it off. You have to have a strong person that understands strategy. Right. And you got to move from concepts, which is the Taco Tuesday, Fried Rice Friday, Soul Food Sundays. Those are concepts to celebrate. But how do you embed diversity into benefits? How do you embed diversity into 401k? How do you look at your compensation to make sure you're paying people equitable in those situations who happen to be different from someone else, where the bias may be there? Right. So all those things required, I think, will help you get there. But you got to have a psychological safe place for people to feel like I can say what I say without offending Kim. Kim knows me and knows my intentions. I think most people want to manage diversity. We have to leverage diversity, and we have to look at it from a cultural perspective. We'll get there a lot faster.
I think those are great examples. And tying into that senior leadership vision, another question came in here. What advice would you give when you don't see appropriate support from that manager level? So not really the senior leadership level, but from the manager level. So senior leadership has the vision, but you're not seeing appropriate support from your manager.
So I think that's where it's at. It's top down, bottom up, squeeze the middle manager. That middle manager has a desire to do it, but he or she is trying to, we got to manage the business, we got to manage the people. They're torn between how to prioritize diversity, how to prioritize inclusion, because they're trying to, reach the numbers, they're trying to reach their goals and the occupant, all those different things. We have to help train them and give them the space and the tools to be able to navigate through. All right, it takes time. I think that in most organizations, you have your innovators, you have your early adapters, but 80% of most organizations in my research are late adapters, waiting to be told what to do. So sometimes you have to have messages that come directly from your CEO or from senior leadership team to those managers. Right? For our diversity business research groups, those who join the leadership team, we send communications saying, Kim is now going to be leading our Asia Pacific Auditor DBRG. Here's what's expected of her. Here's how she's helping to grow the business. These are the competencies that she's going to create by leading this group that should be a part of her performance review. And so you get, and some start thinking, and leadership said, oh my God, I need that type of development. Can I be a part of the group? Right? And then and you see now, for the first time in our history, multicultural households are larger than they've ever been in society. You now have multicultural people working together who are concerned about their biracial children and how they're going to show up, so they're getting into the game. We've had leaders that say, I'm a much better leader and a much better husband and a much better father because of the work I've done with diversity. I would have lost the relationship with my son when he came out to my wife had I not had the knowledge or the experience through work. I would have lost the relationship with my son. So the more you share those stories, the more you show care, and you don't put people in that canceling culture mindset, they're more likely to get on board. But it takes time. Diversity, equity, inclusion is not it is not a destination, but it's a journey. And it's going to change the society. Every decade, we've had different challenges. In this decade, it's actually, in every political time there's been issues around DEI. Right? Who's right, who's wrong, who's up, who's down. So once we get past this election, you're going to see people getting more involved, more engaging in that regard, because they want to be on the right side of history. So there's several levers that we pull to pull people along. Some will do it because it's the right thing to do. Some will do it because it's a business imperative. Some will do it because I don't want to be on the wrong side of history.
Great perspective. Thank you. And I can tell you on the back end, the Q&A is blowing up. So I'm trying to get to as many questions as we can here. Here's another one that popped in. Have you seen any challenges or benefits with non-representative group members leading your ERGs?
Say that again, my non-representative group.
So have you seen any challenges, benefits with non-representative group members leading your ERGs?
No, so our DBRGs, again, the leadership team is open to everyone, right? But the leadership team seems to be very constant. The membership is diverse. But we've had some leaders, we have some of our, for example, one of our leaders who does our partnership, she sits on all DBRGs, right? So she's representing her role. They're helping her to show up at career fairs and conferences. We have a Latino guy that actually sits in the Black DBRG group. So they're actually sharing and mentioning together. You eliminate some of the noise when you're combining to get to inclusion. For example, we begin the year off at MLK Day. We have a program called Inclusion for Us All. We bring everybody together to talk about what we did the prior year, and I'm going to partner for the year to come. So you're sharing. So when it's Black History Month, then next month is the other DBRGs are supporting Black History Month. When it's Women History Month, the other DBRGs are helping Women History Month. Because you have women in pride, they cross all demographics. So you have multicultural groups within themselves. They're just led by different people, and they have different terms. So again, you acknowledge, you support, you move forward, but you have to remove the roadblocks that's stopping people to feel like they belong. And when you're only one of, and for the most of my career, I've always been the only one of, and it's been awkward, it's been hard. I had to work twice as hard as my white counterparts to even stay even. And even doing the work that I'm doing today, I still have challenges with people who don't want to do the work. So we have to keep in mind, when we're breaking glass ceilings, we get cut. We're in the cutting edge of new ideas, concepts. We could get cut. So there's some good days and bad days, but I'm more likely to move with the glass half full. And people will identify, either they'll drop out or they'll join in because they don't want to be left out.
Very good perspective. You are getting a lot of positive praise here in the chat, so wanted to mention that. Another question came in. You have been in the DEI space for a long time with some great experience. Where do you see DEI heading in the next 1 to 5 years?
So I think it's hard to predict. But what I will say with the talent, I think it's going to be very hard for people to get talent because of the shifting demographics. Also, the census data in the United States is now going to break down the other ethnic groups. So it just won't be Hispanic or Latino. They're going to break down that. They're going to break down Asia Pacific Islanders. So people will see their representation, and that data will lead us to where we want to go from that perspective. So watching the data, mining the data, and telling the stories through data will help you to grow as an organization, in my belief. I think that just as we saw through COVID, that many people struggle with people working from home before COVID. Now we're trying to get people back into the office. So society and situations will afford us to behave differently. We will see how that goes under the next administration within the United States. We now have data that shows that 78% of the world are Black and brown. And multicultural households are growing. So that inclusion, I think, is going to come a lot faster. It won't happen in my lifetime, but I believe in my daughter's lifetime, who's 22, will see the benefits of those before. When we go back to civil rights in this country, many of the civil rights leaders, your Jesse Jackson, your Andy Young, your John Lewis, many of them are transitioning. The work that they did, we're just seeing the evidence of that now. So it's going to take generation after generation. Each generation pays it for the next. But if you don't educate those generations, they will miss. Black people have a tendency, and I say deliberately because I don't want to stereotype, they all don't behave this way, but don't want to share the trials and struggles. Right? Our Jewish population, I find one of the most inclusive demographics, but don't want to be to be isolated. They want to be a part of, they'll be inclusive, and they fight harder for others and sometimes don't fight for themselves. So understanding all those nuances, right, I think will make us more whole and more together.
Great. Next one here. How can leadership encourage employees to share their honest views and let them know that it truly is a safe space?
By being vulnerable, by sharing their own struggles. I get the privilege of sitting alongside our CEO when he's working with our interns. And he tells us stories about when he was on Wall Street, how he felt miserably. Right, how he makes mistakes and how he and I train my own team. I tell them it's not about the response. It's not about the reaction. It's how to respond to things that you mess up. Own your stuff, right? But come with a solution. So I think when leaders are more vulnerable and say, when I was your age, I did A, B, C, D, and it was wrong. I've learned and I've been able to harness and develop people. Leaders who take time. I tend to let Fridays be my refresh Fridays, and I spend time with people who are outside of Hyatt or people in Hyatt that want to just talk for a few minutes. I'm never too busy to have a conversation. When I look at the 7 dimensions of culture of how we get work done, I have a tendency to always be late because that meeting that I'm in is present for me. Because I want them to feel that. So we've got to have that eye-to-eye contact. We've got to be vulnerable. We have to listen to understand, not listen to respond. And I tell people all the time who are afraid to reach out to leaders, don't be. There's one thing that you'll learn by senior leaders, the thing they like the most is talking about themselves. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn and grow a lot, right? Because they're willing. No one asks them. No one asks the CEO or the chief diversity officer or the CFO, how you doing today? What are your barriers? How can I help you? Warren Buffett said, whenever you're going to meet someone and you want something from them, to bring them a gift. Right?
Everyone likes gifts.
Everyone likes gifts, right? It's an icebreaker. It's a way to give, but you build that common bond. I'm more likely to promote, develop, or move people who are more like me, right? Because it's easy, but it's difficult for someone who's different. You have leaders now who are really, really trying to lean into that difference to make a difference for not only themselves, but their children and their children's children. Because keep in mind, in this country, by 2025, the blue-eyed heterosexual black white guy living in suburban Illinois, in suburban communities will be the minority.
Which brings us to our next question. We've got about 4 minutes left, so I think time for a couple more. This next question asks, if we are trying to bring communities together, don't white men feel discriminated against as we're trying to push forward only people of color and hire them?
Absolutely, and that is my concern. But people don't want to hear about the white guy because they feel they have to share the pie, because 90+% of the wealth is still with white men. Even white men will tell you, don't worry about white men, let's help the others. But as a practitioner, we have to look ahead to be able to say, what will happen to those white men when the demographics shift? How will we engage those white men? But today, if you look at most organizations and their conference rooms or leaders, they're still predominantly white men. So that is their network. I remember years ago, saying conversation with McKinney said, we don't have a white man's group. And I says, let's take a quick tour. Let me take you around the building. Let me show you these conference rooms with all white men. That's your network. The goal is how do we get you into that network, right? So you can thrive and strive, right? And some people will get in, some people won't. You have white women saying, what about my son? Now he has to go to the back of the line because these other groups. Well, who said he was in the front of the line in the beginning? We got to challenge ourselves to think about what we're doing. But my philosophy, how do we solve for one that benefits all? That we bring this together, because the things that we're learning about how women are treated globally, the things we're learning about people with different languages, the thing we're learning about white men at a certain age are all transferable. So if we can test and learn, if we can put those practices and move from concepts to strategies that's embedded into the purpose of the organization, it guides us to be more inclusive. And I realize it's more simple said than done. This is hard work, and this is not for the weary.
Last question here. Great questions coming in. Would you say a lot of lack of understanding is learned from ignorance, experiences, environmental, news, or mostly at home? So I'll repeat that again. Would you say a lack?
You don't have to read it because I know it, and it's all of the above. It's all of it.
That was one of the options. Okay. Would you like to elaborate?
All of the above. Yeah. So when you talk about what we see on television, right, that shapes our worldview. It is a power of our worldviews that shapes our beliefs and our behaviors. If I am is always looking at the same thing or eating, for example, getting your children to eat green vegetables because they don't like to eat them. You've got to get that into their diet for them to do it. It takes time. So experiences, being able to have conversations. I speak to everyone. I was taught that growing up, that good morning, how are you? You never know what someone's going through. You don't know that smile that you give them, hello, could help them. That was my orientation. I was also taught that as being the only Black person in the airport or Black person in a job, whether you knew him or not, you spoke to him. You nodded, you gave him the wave. That was important. So I think the more we push ourselves to engage in conversations with others, especially when they're being treated injustice, during the injustice, during COVID, I was on the train with an Asian woman who had worked 18 hours in the hospital with COVID, right? She was Asian, and the young kids on the train was bullying her, right? I was equally afraid because they could have beat me up too, but I stood just next to her, right? It made her feel comfortable. She grabbed my arm and we got off together. They stopped because they saw that united, right? So sometimes it's not saying anything, but put yourself in someone else's shoes. Some of us don't even bend over to put them on. Right? We have to help each other through this transition. But the things we see, messages with TikTok and all the social media things that's out there, some of that stuff is fake news. Some of it's not true. But those should be triggers for you to go and do the research and learn more about what the issues are. Right? I don't want to get in politics, but we see a lot right now where we don't know what the real truth is. Right, we're trying to figure it out, but that's why diversity business research groups are important. You can go to someone that says, "Can I open on a conversation about being Latino?" What does that feel like? What does that mean when someone says that? People know when you're trying to learn, and people know when you're being cynical, and people know when you're bullying them. So you got to come from a place being vulnerable and say, "I just don't know. Help me understand." And I've had several of those conversations. I've had people to apologize to me that I met 20 years ago after the death of murder George Floyd. One leader told me, knowing what I know now, I am convinced that we were discriminating against you because you were Black. Right?
Thank you so much, Tyrone. I think we're at time. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Buy the book. It's all in the book.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tyrone Studemeyer, for your time and expertise. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.